Hey guys, in this video we're making this beautiful zigzag wire bracelet. We've made our bracelet with black gemstone beads and put a simple hook and loop clasp, making it really easy to put on and off. For our design today, the thicker wire we're using is 20 gauge dead soft silver wire, and then the thinner one to wrap our beads on is the 24 gauge wire. For our bracelet, we need about 70 centimetres of the 20 gauge dead soft silver wire. Now we start by placing the ends together, following it back down to the other end to find the middle. Making a small bend in this end, and we're going to bring it down quite small to form a loop. We can start to bring these wires out straighter as well. Now coming in with our round nose pliers, grabbing that bend on the end and bringing those wires around and across each other to form a nice loop on the end. Now we want to bring these wires down straight next to each other, so just with some flat pliers, just grab the base of that loop there and bend each wire down straight. We want to gently work those wires so our loop sits nice and together on the end, and these wires both come down straight and sit next to each other. Just take your time working with your wires until you're happy with your loop on the end, and these two wires come down nice and straight and next to each other. Once you're happy with your loop there, we can move on to our zigzags. So using some flat nose pliers, we want some that have a decent sized base here. Just grabbing our wires below the loop there and making a 90-degree bend. Readjusting your pliers to grab it just after that bend, and then making another 90-degree bend in the wires. Bending back and forth with each zigzag, making sure your wires are sitting nice and close and next to each other. Just readjusting those pliers, bending those wires backwards and forwards, trying to make each zigzag as even as possible. I usually zigzag down to about 18 or 19 centimetres long, and then we place our clasp on, which brings it to about 19 or 20 centimetres long in total. So keep measuring that length as you go. This one here you can see is about 18 centimetres, so just place one more bend in my wires. Once you're happy with the length of your zigzag, we're going to separate these wires. So just sort of gently try and peel them apart, being careful, trying to keep that zigzag in place. Now with some pliers, I just grab that loop on the end and bring one wire outwards. Mine is still a little bit tangled together. So twisting one wire upwards and one wire downwards, so that we've got our zigzag kind of opening up and the points are going to touch together in between each sort of diamond shape. Making sure these wires touch together at the base of the loop as well. Your zigzags should match up quite well the whole way along, but don't stress about the whole thing just yet. We're just going to focus on these first few, and then the rest should come together nicely as we move along the bracelet. Now we move on to the beading part of our design. So grabbing that thinner 24 gauge wire, we need a length about 50 centimetres long. We're also using 6mm gemstone beads. Now we're going to wrap this thinner wire around between the loop and the first zigzag. So make sure that loop's nice and straight. Then I just hold the end of the wire there and wrap it around nice and tight a couple of times, coming over the top of the wire, making sure it's nice and tight and tidy. You can start to think about which side you're going to have be the inside, so you can cut your tails off on the inside and keep it nice and tidy on the outside of your bracelet. Once you're happy, you can cut that little tail off nice and short. crimping it in tight with your pliers so there's no sharp edges. Now we can place our first bead onto this thinner wire. Bringing that bead up the other end, and you should be able to pull it into the middle of the diamond, so in between our first zigzags, and then bring the two wires so that they sit nice and close together. Now wrapping the smaller wire around nice and tight where those two wires touch together so that we have a nice strong connection there. We want each of our zigzag connections looking nice and even, so I always do just 2 loops around on each one. Now placing another bead on, and we just repeat this same process the whole way along our bracelet. So holding that bead into the middle of the diamond, and then where those wires touch together, wrapping our smaller wire around 2 full loops around to make that nice and strong connection. Now it's on to the next bead. So as you work your way along the bracelet, the zigzag points should come together nicely, and you should be able to wrap it quite easily, looking nice and even the whole way along. You can work with your wires on the zigzags a little bit as you go if you need them in a slightly different position. Just keep everything nice and even with the same amount of wraps, and your zigzag should form really nicely the whole way along. Once you've beaded down all the way to your desired length, mine is about at the 19 centimetre mark, and then adding a clasp, it will be about 20 centimetres total. So we want our wires on this end coming straight up from the middle so that that last zigzag is complete. So just bending them upwards in the middle with our pliers, and then wrapping this thinner wire around the other wires to secure that in place. Now to make a simple hook on this end, we just cut one of these wires off, so just above where we wrapped that thinner wire around. Now measuring along about 2 centimetres, grabbing that point with our pliers and bending that wire back against itself, making it a nice small bend and keeping those wires flat next to each other. We can cut that thinner wire off now, and once you're happy with this little pointed end of your wires, holding it nice and tight at the base with our pliers there, we wrap the tail end around the base and over the top of that thinner wire wrap, bringing it around nice and tight and tidy. You might have a side of your bracelet that looks nicer than the other, so cutting the tail off on what will be the inside of the bracelet. Cutting that tail nice and short and crimping it in tight so there's no sharp edges. Now starting to bend and form our wire into a bracelet shape. Now we can bend our hook. So just grabbing with our pliers just over halfway along, rotating to bend it around. I like to bend the tip out just a little bit as well. So just working with your wire until your hook fits nice and evenly into the loop. You want it to be able to come on and off nice and easily and sit nice and tidy. Now you can take your time and check over your whole wire bracelet with your pliers, checking all of the zigzags, making sure everything's sitting in the right position and nice and evenly. And they're all coming around the beads on the sides. Making sure you're happy with everything on your hook and loop clasp, and that you can put it on and off okay as well. So there's your beautiful zigzag beaded wire bracelet.